Hi everyone, my name is Mark Moykins from Big Mountain Studio, and today we're going to talk about onboarding. What does onboarding mean? Onboarding is basically giving your users of your app something to look at or to get some information to kind of get them prepared to using your application. The reason I'm doing this tutorial is because I've actually had a few people ask me about onboarding and how to present the screen and how to only show it one time and not show it again the next time the person comes into the application. What I have here is just a simple application that I made up. It actually does nothing. So you have a welcome screen here, and this is actually the onboarding screen. And this cute little robot here I got from thenounproject.com, and it is from Oksana Latisheva. I'm probably saying her name wrong. Okay, let's talk about how this is going to work. As you can see right now, I have the initial view controller, which is defined by this arrow right here. And there's also a property that defines it too. When I click on this, I have this checkbox right here that says is initial view controller. That means when the application starts, it's going to come to this storyboard, main storyboard, and it's going to find where this arrow is and show this screen first. And just for extra information here, how does your application know to even use this storyboard? Well, it's in the project settings. If you come here and you look down under deployment info, main interface is your main storyboard. So you notice here it shows storyboards, right? It says main.storyboard right now, but you'll see if I save it and I come back and go back, it just changes it back to main. So what it does is the application starts, it says, oh, I need to go to the main storyboard. It comes to the main storyboard and says, okay, well, which view controller do I look at? And it looks for the one with the arrow, and it'll show that one first. The onboarding screen actually isn't defined as the first screen to show. And I'm going to show you why that is. Well, for one reason, when the person comes into your application for the first time, that's the only time we want to show this welcome screen. Every time after that, it's just going to go to the main screen. When your application first starts, it's going to come into the app delegate. And it's going to run this function first right here. Your application did finish launching with options. Okay, now I need to explain something else too. When your application launches, it launches your application inside of a window. And I've laid this out in another tutorial in the past of actually how that works. You have your window, and there's only one window for your entire application, and then it just switches view controllers. Switches views, adds views, takes away views. So you only have one window. And what you can do is you can access that window. You can set up that window and tell the window what the first screen is going to be. Okay, we can get rid of that because we don't need it. And the first thing I'm going to do is set up that window I've been telling you about. So if we come here and we go to window, let's set that up. We're going to create a UI window. And then we're just going to kind of set up the frame, like how big it's going to be. And really what we're going to do is we're just going to use the UI screen. And you can see right here, UI screen, it knows about your device. It knows what device and what hardware you're using. So that's very handy. That's actually what we need. And we're going to go to the main screen, and we're just going to get its bounds. So that's basically, we're just getting the size of the device, and we're setting it to our UI window to be the right size. Okay, now we need to get the storyboard, because later on what we're going to do is we're going to do this, self.window, and this window is an optional. So, we might need that question mark because it could be null, but it's not going to be. And we want to set the root view controller. And this is actually where we're going to set the view controller of which view we want. It's going to be either your onboarding screen or your main screen. So that's how you set the root view controller. Now, I don't have a variable set up right now, but I will pretty soon. And then after we set that up, then we just say window, then we say make key and visible. And that's pretty simple. All it does is shows the window and makes it the key window. And like I said, there's only going to be one window. So once you call this, it's just going to show you already have your root view controller ready. So it's just going to show your view controller in the window. Pretty simple. So now we just need some logic to know which view controller we're going to show. And how do we know which view controller we're going to show? Well, you have a couple different options. When you look at this example, let's go back here. Where's my mouse? There it is. Here we're asking for a name. So in this case, we know that when a person enters their name, that they've been to this screen. And we're going to store that name in a variable. And we're going to store that information, that name, on the device. I'm going to show you how to do that. It's very handy. Okay, so we're going to store that information in user defaults. What is user defaults? User defaults is basically storage space that Apple gives you where you can store things like settings for your application or information that you want to know the next time the user starts up your application. You can easily access it and save information and pull information from it. Okay, so let's do that. Now for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off the assumption that the user entered in a name, and I'm going to store that name in user defaults. So I will say if user defaults .standard .value, I'm going to use this first option right here, value for the string. And basically the way it works is, there, like that. I'm going to store their name. So it's key value pair. So think of it as a dictionary where you have a bunch of keys and a bunch of values associated with that key. So what I want is I want the value that's associated with the name key. And the information that you can store in the value can be anything. Like if we look at this, see, it's returning any. And so what we're going to store is a string. So what we'll have to do is cast this as a string. And it can be null. So I'm using that question mark because it is optional. And then we want to check this to make sure it is not null. Or nil. Sorry. I program in a bunch of different languages, and some of them are null and some of them are nil, but they mean the same thing. So if you hear me say null, I mean nil. All right, great. So this is checking for a nil. If I don't have anything in here, I haven't been to the onboarding screen. So show the onboarding screen. Else. Okay, and that's how we're making our decision right there. All right, well, how do we get those screens? Now, in order to get the view controller, I first have to be able to get a reference to the storyboard that that view controller is on. So I need a reference to this main storyboard right here. And to get that, I just use UI storyboard. And you can reference it just by a string. This is, the name of the storyboard is called main. So that's all I need to really reference. It's just that first part of the name. I don't have to say main.storyboard, just main. And for the bundle, we only have one, so I'm just going to say nil. And now we have a reference to that storyboard. Okay, the storyboard, as you saw before, has 2 view controllers in it, so I only need to get one. So let's set up our variable so we can set it up. So we can set it, rather. View controller, and is basically just a type of UI view controller. And when we come here, we want that view controller to equal. And in order to get that storyboard, we just say, in order to get that view controller, we just say storyboard dot. And this one, what is it? This is the onboarding screen. I just realized I did mess this up. Not equals. If it equals nil, they haven't been to the onboarding screen. So let's get a reference to the onboarding screen. And I need this function right here. Instantiate a view controller with the identifier and a string. Okay, now identifier. We haven't set up an identifier yet for our storyboards. So let's do that now. Okay, now what I normally like to do, let's go into the properties here. And you want to go to the identity inspector. So here's our view controller right here, onboarding VC. And this is what it's looking for right here. This identity, this storyboard identifier. What I do is I just copy the name of the class and I just paste it right in there. All right, let's head back into our delegate. And we name this onboarding VC. And for this one, if we want the main screen, we can do this a little bit differently. We can say storyboard dot instantiate initial view controller. That's the one I'm going to use. Because remember, the main view controller that has the arrow pointing to it is your initial view controller. So if we just use that, it's going to return the main view controller. What did I do wrong here? Insert an exclamation point. Okay, cool. So I guess it returns an optional. Yeah, see that question mark? So that means an optional. That means it could return a nil, but we're saying we definitely have that set. And the reason why it can return a nil is because remember, this initial view controller isn't required. I could just as easily do this. If I come here and uncheck this, now I have no initial view controller on the main storyboard. So that's why it can return nil. But I know we have one, so I'm just going to use the exclamation point and tell it I definitely have one. Now we've got everything set up, so let's test this. So what should happen right now is I don't have anything in this standard defaults. So it should show me the onboarding screen. Let's test that out. There we go. Okay, great. Now the next thing we want to do is we just want to be able to come in here and enter our name. Oops. And then click continue. Nothing happens right now, but when I click continue, I want to go to the main screen. And more importantly, when I start this app up again, I don't want to see this welcome screen again. I just want to go straight to my main screen. Okay. Now on my storyboard, now notice there's no link between here. When I click continue, I don't have something like this set up. So when I click continue, it automatically goes to this main storyboard with using a segue. Normally that's how I do things, but this is going to be a little bit different because I need to execute some code. I need to save whatever is in here before I go on to the next view controller. So instead what I'm going to do, I'm still going to create a segue, but I'm going to create the segue from my onboarding view controller over to here. And basically what this does for me is instead of using continue as the only way to get here, I can also use this click skip and also use the segue. Or I can use it in code, and in code I can say use a segue to go to this main view controller. That's what we're going to do. Okay, so we need an action outlet for this continue button. We got to write some code for that continue button. So let's do that. Let's click on here, and we'll call it continue touched. It's going to be an action. I call it touch because it's touch up inside. I send in the button, click connect. And there we go. All right, so what do I want to do in here? Well, we know the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to save whatever's in that text box in our user defaults. Remember, we're looking for it in our app delegate, so we have to set it when we click this button. Now, normally what I would do is I would write some code to make sure that I had a value in this text box, but the purpose of this video is just to show you how onboarding works. So if you want to add something like that, you can. But for me, I'm just going to write user defaults. Let's make some extra room here. There we go. Standard dot set. So now look at this. You can set all kinds of information in user defaults. You can set ints, floats, doubles, bools, and then you have any. And then you can set URLs too. But for us, we just want to store whatever's in that name text field, which I can't reference because I don't have an outlet for it. So let's add a reference to that name text field. Right there. Yeah, outlet. So name text field dot text. And remember, the key that we were using was called name. If we come back here and we look at our app delegate, right here. So we use user defaults and we get the value for the key name. So we have to set it with using the same key. All right, good. Now that I have my user default stored, I can navigate over to the main screen. And how do I do that? Now we know we have a segue ready. So let's use that segue. And I need to refer to this segue somehow in code. Remember how we gave our view controllers identifiers so we could refer to them in code? Well, we're going to kind of do the same thing with a segue. We want to be able to refer to it in code, so we need to give it an identifier. And I'll just call this to main segue, like that. So here, all I have to do is just say perform segue with identifier. And our identifier, we called it to main segue. Okay, are we going to send anything with it? We'll just send this class with it. That should work. Let's try that. Let's see if that works. Look at that. Worked perfectly. Okay, now we need to do one more test. I entered my name, I clicked continue on the onboarding screen, and now it brings me to the main screen. But I don't want that onboarding screen to come up again. So let's do that test. Let's get rid of that. Let's click on onboarding again. And there we go. It skipped the onboarding and brought me straight to the main screen. And I told you I was going to do something else, right? I was going to put my name up here so it said welcome Mark. That's easy enough to do. If we come to this screen, see, I already have some code here for that slider down here. I was playing around with it. And okay, I have an outlet for that label. This is basically, if I hover over this dot, it shows me where that label is. And as you can see, it's that welcome label up top. So I want to set the welcome label. And it's going to be a string, and it's going to say welcome. And this is where it's going to hold my name, and then I'll have an exclamation point. So this is a placeholder I'm going to put here. And I'm going to put a variable in here. Yeah, when I do that, let's just create a variable that says let, and it'll be my name, equals, and then I'm going to get it from my user defaults. User defaults dot standard. And we already did this before. Remember, we got the value in our app delegate. Well, that's what we're going to use again. If we come here and look at our app delegate, we said user defaults.standard.value for key name. So it's already highlighted, so why don't I just copy that? Come back here and just paste it in there. Okay, there we go. So we should get a name there, and after we get the name, we're just going to put it in this string, and it should show my name. Hey guys, I was looking at this code and I just realized there's a better way to do this. Instead of like getting it from, getting a variable from user defaults and then, using the exclamation point. Instead, what I can do is I can just use if let. I can't believe I didn't even think about this. But if you just do this, if let, get rid of that, and then surround it with this. What this does is basically says if there is a value in the user defaults and it's not null, put it in this variable. And then once you have that, then you can use it. But so if it comes back and it is nil, then it'll just skip over this and it won't put anything in the welcome label. So I just want to show you that real quick. This is the preferred method of doing it. And again, I'm surprised I didn't think of it at first. But that is the right way to do it there. Yes, that's better. Okay, good. So now you know a little bit about onboarding and how the basic mechanism works. And just to review, it all starts in the app delegate. You can choose something from your user defaults, find out what the value is to determine if the person has seen onboarding or not. And if they have, then you just go straight to your main view controller. In the value here, you can store anything. You can actually just store a Boolean that says seen onboarding, yes or no, true or false. So here, I just when I click continue, I go to the main screen, but you can actually go to the second onboarding screen and then the third onboarding screen. And then on the third onboarding screen, then go to your main screen. So it's all up to you on how you want to design that. All right, well, that's it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something new, and I hope this really helps. If it has, give it a thumbs up because that really helps me out. And this video was made for a couple of my viewers named Reese and Muhammad. So I hope it helps them out because I made it for them. But if you think this will help out some of your other friends, go ahead and share it on social media. All right, thank you, everyone, and have a good night.